carved our way to Barcelona.
The anarchists also had their own network, and in fact they often, if you like, went by different underground railways and arrived by different routes.
Come.
It was difficult because, for example, Britain and France were involved in non-intervention, and therefore it was actually, strictly speaking, illegal to go to Spain.
There are people going to Spain who are virtually penniless. I mean, virtually penniless, and they're not giving up jobs to go to Spain, but they don't have degrees, and they're not journalists, and they're not tourists, and they're not travellers. My father talks about the journey, about leaving from George Square in double-decker buses and going down, and on the journey they seem to have been well treated and things worked out okay until they got there. They did 6 weeks training and then thrown straight into battle. Literally the back of the truck opened, they went out, and that was them in the battle. And it was just absolute chaos and really quite disorganised, but I think it was a different kind of fighting. I mean, the Spanish Civil War, you have to think that there was something like Guernica, which was like Fallujah, the flattening of a place, and that kind of bombing. That was something that was part of a very modern warfare on the one hand. On the other hand, you'd, I think, the last cavalry charge in modern military history.
The battle between Republicans and right-wing rebels hadn't reached Barcelona yet. In that city, a whole new way of living was being explored, especially in Barcelona's old town, the epicenter of the anarchist movement.
The Raval in Barcelona was, from the early 1920s onwards, and even before that, an area from which immigrant workers came from the rest of Spain. They tended to be illiterate, they tended to be very poor, but it was precisely there that the anarchists organised education, organised community organisations and so on, and really that was their base.
Llegué a Barcelona del año 34. No participé antes del 36 en ningún grupo anarquista. Quería. Lo que sí participaba era, con mi padre, en todos los mítines, ¿no? Entonces allí se reunían, yo iba a las plazas de toros, la Monumental y tal, estaba negra de gente, negra.
The Café La Fragua was a kind of typical restaurant for working class people. Long tables, simple furniture, basic food, cheap and available, lots of noise, lots of debate, lots of discussion. So this is Barcelona. This is Barcelona where there's a power on the ground, there are organizations, the streets are controlled by people's militias, the factories are controlled by workers' committees. There is a real new kind of power emerging in Barcelona, a workers' power.
Instructions from above, from the government, were no longer simply accepted. Even simple requests for curfew, for example, would be debated, overruled.
Ja ho sabem, camarada, però no esperem ordres de dalt. Sabem el que passa. Els carrers estan organitzats i la gent sap el que ha de fer.
The people felt they had the power.
The fundamental anarchist principle is you should always challenge authority. And if it can't justify itself, which is usually the case, then you should work to dismantling it and creating a freer and more libertarian relationship among people.
Nosotros defendimos al concepto humanista, a la lealtad, a la honestidad, a los principios que fueron básicos del anarquismo, de sacrificio más que de lucro. En fin de cuentas, de lo que se trata es de abrir brecha, de no someterse, de ser dignos, de ser hombre, de luchar por nuestra propia dignidad. Lo que aporte o no aporte, los que sigan o no sigan, pero yo creo que es la misión del hombre como la mujer, ¿no? De defender su dignidad, su derecho a ser, su libertad, colectiva e individualmente.
It looks from the outside as if there was a spontaneous anarchist revolution in 1936, but it's really misleading. There was a long preparatory period just in the general population. in which the ideas, assumptions, the conceptions of how to run a more free society just became instilled in people.
I was told to report here. Qui és vostè? Andre Prudhomme sent me.
Ethel had arrived in the most exciting place on earth at the time. For 10 extraordinary months in 36 and 37, the region of Catalonia became the center of one of the most radical revolutions in world history. Some 3 million men, women and children were involved. In the countryside, surrounding Barcelona, peasants formed communes on land confiscated from the old ruling elite. Workers took over the factories. Police were replaced with civilian self-defense forces. In Catalonia, 3/4 of the economy was under anarchist control. Hotels, shops, barber shops and restaurants were collectivized and managed by their workers, often making them more efficient.
En la calle Viladomati, Gran Vía, de un antiguo convento, y ahí se hizo, primero dice Universidad Popular, y luego quedó en el Instituto Libre.
From each, according to his ability, to each, according to his needs, was put into practice. In some communes, money was entirely eliminated and replaced with vouchers and bartering schemes.
A partir del moment que la revolució s'extén per Catalunya, en algunes de les zones catalanes, al centre o a la zona costera, hi ha algunes col·lectivitzacions en mans d'anarquistes que sí que deixaran d'utilitzar la moneda corrent i que faran un altre tipus de moneda o fins i tot utilitzaran el sistema de l'intercanvi. Però bàsicament aquest tipus de substitució de moneda per l'intercanvi és més un mite que una realitat que s'estén per tota la Catalunya revolucionària de l'any 36. Per tant, la moneda continua utilitzant-se i sí que és veritat que a vegades entre unes col·lectivitzacions i unes altres s'intercanvien els productes. A una li sobrava, per exemple, blat i a l'altra, en canvi, tenia un excedent de vi.
Every facet of life was being experimented with.
It was an extremely successful, maybe the most successful case of people actually taking their lives into their own hands, running it successfully. Very poor people. I mean, I remember as a child back in the around 1940, when I was just learning about these things, reading the documents of the collectives, and some of them were very moving. There was one in particular, a village called Membria, which describes itself as, these are just documents put together by peasants and workers in different places. They describe it as the poorest village in Spain, but the most just.
Barcelona's a marvellous place in its architecture. The buildings are really wonderful, each one gleaming brightly and not a trace of soot or grime. In the main square, the Plaza de la República, the white walls of the Generalitat, the government offices, glisten in brilliant sunshine. Birds are singing in the trees and the sky is the most beautiful blue I've ever seen. Civilian soldiers dressed in their inevitable dungarees and little red and black Glengarry bonnets and smoking endless cigarettes strode casually in Las Ramblas or chatted to the girl soldiers in the Plaza Catalunya.
Y yo recuerdo que las chicas de donde yo trabajaba tuvieron la ocurrencia de comprarse, porque nadie los llevaba, de comprarse unos sombreros y venir a trabajar con sombrero, porque entonces solamente los llamaban las burguesas, ¿no? Las chicas bien. Y entonces tuvieron la ocurrencia porque nadie compraba sombreros, ¿no? Entonces, sí, aquello fue un gran cambio.
This new confidence, this thirst for change, came as a reaction to years of repression.
Yo recuerdo